All right. Good evening and welcome to Representative April Berg of the 44th District's virtual town hall. Some of you have submitted questions in advance, and I will read those questions out to Representative Berg. You may also submit your question live via the comment section. So please submit your questions now, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Before we begin answering questions, I'd like to open up the floor for some brief comments from Representative Berg. Rep Berg, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and welcome to everybody to my virtual town hall right now in 2023. I am so excited to be doing this town hall tonight from Olympia. We are still hard at work in the House, and I just wanted to share a couple of things that we've been doing and working on this session so far. So I will tell you, we came in with a lot of really big goals, and we've accomplished a lot of those goals this first few weeks. Some of the things that we heard loud and clear, that I heard loud and clear from you, were that you wanted us to focus on housing, public safety, education, transportation, healthcare, the list goes on. And I am so happy to report that we have gotten bills across the finish line that address all of those issues. I will tell you, coming out of the pandemic has not been easy for our community. And so coming back to Olympia, being able to serve in person with my colleagues has been just an absolute honor. So we got to work immediately on the things you care about first. I'm happy to say that one of the first things we did was action on food security. We know that a lot of our food banks and families who depend on those food banks were really feeling the pinch. So we were able to get some early action dollars going to our food banks across the state. The other thing we focused on was talking a lot about housing and what does that look like. And I am happy to say that we passed with bipartisan support the missing middle off of the House floor. Another thing you talked a lot about during the interim before I got back here was public safety. And so there's a lot that we've done and a lot more to be done. So one of the things that we did on the House side was pass the assault rifle ban. I know for our community and many across the state, it was a top priority after we've seen tragedies across our nation involving assault rifles. And so we're also talking a lot about pursuits. I did co-sponsor a bill that would help with pursuits and the current laws in the books. It didn't make it off the House floor, but it sounds like the senator from the 44th did have a bill that is coming over to the House. And I'm looking forward to discussing that with my colleagues about how to really focus on public safety and our pursuit policy. But one of the exciting places that I think everyone can agree with police pursuits is on creating a model policy. So that is advancing, and I am very confident that you will see action in that area. When we talk about education, we've been talking a lot about learning loss and supporting our schools and supporting our students. We had some powerful bills come across the House floor dealing with special education and transportation, as well as helping our students with the actual learning loss within their classrooms. So I'll be excited to talk a little bit more about that later, but I will say, we didn't get to where we needed to be with special education funding, but we are going to make some historic investments for that student population. So with that, I could absolutely talk on and on about all of the great things we've accomplished so far and things that I'm looking forward to seeing. But the reason why I'm here tonight is to hear from you. I am going to, before we start, do a shameless plug for, of course, being in person in district this Saturday at 10 a.m. at Woodside Elementary. But tonight's going to be a great time to answer your questions, especially if you're not able to come out and see us in person on Saturday. So with that, I'm going to ask our fabulous moderator to go ahead and jump into the questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Rep Berg. Our first question is, as the new House Finance Committee Chair, what finance bills are you most excited for this session?
Well, I tell you, thank you for that. And I am a new chair. And so I'm going to kind of start there because I will tell you, it was an honor to be named chair of House Finance. As many of you know, I am passionate about fiscal policy and really right-sizing our tax policy statewide. not just for individuals, but for businesses as well. So, one of the bills I'm most excited about is 1355, and that comes from Representative Wiley, who is from America's Vancouver. And she wrote a bill that addressed a need that I heard about all summer long, and that's our seniors and the potential for many seniors and many vets to be removed from the exemption, from their property tax exemption status. Now, the reason for this is because at the federal level, the COLA for our seniors went up by 8.7%. Very necessary, very needed, and very much welcomed. But what that did was it kind of triggered some of them no longer being eligible under our current standards for their their senior property tax exemption. Rep Wiley wrote a bill that not only took care of that problem, but did a lot more. It actually said, look, we need to reassess seniors and their status every 3 years instead of every 5 years. That means we'll be able to get more senior citizens on the rolls to receive this property tax exemption. The other thing it provided for is notification, letting seniors know that this is available to them and how to apply for it. So I think that was one of the bills that I was excited to see and pass through House Finance. I was even more excited to pass it off the House floor. The other bill that I'm very excited about, because this is a shameless plug for myself, is a bill that I introduced because our county really wanted the legislature to address annexation. And so a lot of you in the 44th live in unincorporated Snohomish County, which is beautiful. But a lot of you want to live within a city limits because you'll have access to council services, you'll have access to quicker public safety services. And frankly, a lot of you want to say, I'm from a city of which, like Bothell or Mill Creek or Everett, you want to be in that city, not just as far as your postcode is concerned and when you address letters, but when it comes to going and talking to city councils about what's important to you. So I have a good little bill on annexation that will help cities provide for the infrastructure to annex. It will provide a sales tax credit to cities for about 5 years or within the next 5 years, so that if they do annex a portion of unincorporated Snohomish County, that they will be made whole in terms of any infrastructure investments that they have to make. So that's a good little bill that we passed out of House Finance. Super proud of it and really excited that so many of you came out to testify in favor of it, including a lot of our fire department folks, as well as a lot of our county councilors and of course city councilors. So thank you for that question.
Great, and thank you for that response, Rep Berg. So our next question is about your work as the leader of the Food Fighters Caucus. So as the leader of the Food Fighters Caucus in the legislature, can you explain a little bit about what that caucus does and what are some of the priorities this session?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. It is kind of another thing that I do here in Olympia is help lead a caucus of like-minded colleagues who really want to see food security prioritized throughout our legislature. So the Food Fighters Caucus is a motley crew of colleagues of mine in the Democratic caucus who are focused on food security. And that spans everything from helping out our food banks when they are running low to looking at our rural communities and what do our farmers and agriculture folks need. We also look at things that are sometimes you might not think about being purely food security, but education issues and school lunches. And so one of the things that I'm most proud of that the Food Fighters took on is a bill by Rep Berg that would actually provide universal meals for all school children. Now, that bill did not get out of the House in that form, but it did make some progress in terms of helping out our low-income elementary age students. So that one I'm really proud of, and it's just another step towards getting universal meals for all students.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Rep Berg. This is just a reminder that you're tuning in to a live virtual town hall with Representative April Berg. If you have a question, you can submit it via the comment section. All right, our next question is, as we continue to build back from the COVID-19 pandemic, what is the legislature doing to support Washington State's healthcare system?
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for phrasing the question as what are we doing to build back? Because I think that that's important to remember that we are building back. We are not completely whole post-pandemic. And frankly, just being in a workplace now, I know many of you are back in the workplace full time or back at school full time. We know that we've got colleagues, friends, family members who still are coming down with COVID. And so this is kind of my public service announcement. Please get vaccinated and boosted. Please keep up with those booster shots. COVID is real and it is still in the community. But of course, because of vaccines and boosters, it's not as prevalent as it was 2 years ago. So that said, as we recover, we are really making some strides in healthcare and learning from truly from some gaps that we saw because of the pandemic. And one of the things I want to focus on with this question is really our response. And so we've had a bill that's gone through healthcare and also through appropriations that talks about basically it's a corps, kind of like an Army Corps, but for healthcare providers. And our state really wants to invest in that so that we have literal boots on the grounds when it comes to healthcare. So yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's paramount that we focus on healthcare, that we focus on keeping communities whole and healthy, because as we know from the pandemic, when we're not whole and healthy, we're not open. And it does affect our economy, and it affects our schools, and it affects literally how we live our lives. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Rep Berg. So now our next question comes, let's see, came in via the survey, and they ask, what are you doing about the Blake decision and the Pursuits bill?
Oh my word. So those are the hot button issues right now in the legislature. And I tell you, let's start with Blake. So we have a group of legislators who really are the best of the best that are coming up with a solution for Blake. Now, I will say where that solution stands is that it's passed the Senate floor. And it is, and maybe solution is too big of a word, an answer to Blake. And I believe it threads that needle because you really do not want to incarcerate people because they're struggling, but you absolutely want to incentivize them to seek help and seek treatment. And we did see some holes from our original answer to Blake. And for those of you who don't know what Blake is, I want to just maybe step back to 2 seconds. Blake was a decision by our state Supreme Court that basically made it not a crime to possess drugs. A simple possession was no longer punishable by incarceration. Now, as a legislature, that did take us by surprise. And so we had very little time to craft a response. The response we crafted really focused on treatment and helping people get clean and get sober and stay there. That said, there were absolutely some gaps. And so one of the top priorities coming back here was to really fill those gaps. And so we decided that we needed to focus on one body at a time. So the Senate went ahead and took the lead on this one, and they focused on crafting a response and really turning that dial between carrot and stick. How do you incentivize someone to get treatment while protecting the community and really saying that drug use, open drug use, is not okay? And I want to say that again. Open drug use is not okay. Drugs are absolutely illegal in this state. And at no point do we come in with the motivation or the goal of decriminalizing drugs. But what we wanted to do was make people whole because we do know that there are friends and family members in community who are struggling with substance use disorder. So what's coming over to me from the Senate? And full disclosure, I have not seen that bill because it is not going through a committee on which I serve, but I'm certain that I will be seeing it come to our caucus before it goes on the floor. But my understanding is that it really does thread that needle between treatment and the incentive, the necessity, almost the mandate that you got to get treatment. We want our community safe and we want our community members whole. So that's where we are in Blake. Pursuits, it was another one. We did some amazing things around public safety and accountability in the 2021 session. And there were, in 2022, we came back and we had to tweak it a little bit. There were absolutely things like all legislation where we had to say, we gotta turn that lever. We gotta turn that knob, make this one a little bit better. Unfortunately, in 2022, we knew we had to do that with pursuits. And unfortunately, on the House side, fortunately on the House side, we did get a bill passed that addressed it. On the Senate side, they did not pass it. So we came back now in 2023 to, again, turn that dial. How can we help make communities safe and give police and our public safety officers all of the tools they need? I was proud to co-sponsor a bill by one of my colleagues that did that. It did not make it off the House floor, but there again, Senator Lovick from the fabulous 44th had a bill that is coming to us from the Senate that does that, that kind of turns that dial. In addition to that, it does have a model policy component to it. When I say a model policy component, what we've realized as a legislature and law enforcement communities is that we need our joint training center. That's this training center in Burien that actually trains officers to be officers. We would like them to craft model policy around pursuits. We do not think that there is a one size fits all solution for pursuits in communities. Mill Creek is very different than Yakima. Mill Creek and Snohomish are very different than Vancouver and Southwest Washington, Kelso, Longview. So we want to say, can we get some model policy so that communities can implement it at the local level in a way that makes sense for them and their members? So that said, that's where we are on Blake and Pursuits. Great question. And I will tell you, it's going to take a lot of our time down here in Olympia the next few weeks to really get these bills right.
I don't doubt that. All right. So on to our next question. Since you were appointed finance chair this session, you now also sit on the appropriations committee, but this meant that this was your first session. You're no longer able to serve on the education committee. So how have you still been involved in the education sphere?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And thank you to whoever submitted it for recognizing that my committee assignments did change. So being chair of House Finance automatically puts me on appropriations. And just kind of if you want some inside baseball, in the House, we have a finance committee and we have an appropriation committee, taxing and spending. On the Senate side, they have ways and means. It's one committee. So for me, as chair of finance, I automatically sit on appropriations. So that left me one spot for a committee. As many of you know, I am a recovering school board director, having served on 2 school boards in our region. And I always thought education would be the committee that I will be on for now and forever. Luckily, I think folks saw something that I needed to do because I also have a passion for local government, and I've previously sat on that committee as well. But finance has a lot of connections with local government. So now I'm on local government instead of education. But I am still passionate about education. So the way that I've kind of inserted myself into conversations around education is through our proviso process, where I have written language asking for funding for very important things around education. Everything from Core Plus, which is the program that trains our young high schoolers in different areas like construction or aerospace, and I'm hoping, fingers and toes crossed, maritime. I've also asked for additional spots for our early ECAP. So that's our early learners. ECAP is kind of that pre-K folks who need a little extra help, a little extra support, and they're income challenged. Well, we also have what's called early EK. So even before those preschool years, for spots, again, young people who need a little extra help, a little extra support, and their families are income challenged. So I've written a proviso to ask for more spots in early ECAP. I've also written a proviso that deals with high school and beyond. It was a good little bill of mine that didn't make it across the House floor, but I'm hoping that the concept will be funded through a proviso. So I'm still active in the education community, talking with many of our teachers, our students, our amazing administrators and school board directors about education and what it looks like on the ground, and more importantly, what I can do as a policymaker to help our educators. So thank you for that question. Thank you for playing inside baseball with me. And I'm still active in the education space.
Thank you, Representative Berg. So our next question comes from the comments, and they ask, what is one of the greatest examples of bipartisan legislation so far this session?
Ooh, I like that question. So I'm going to start with every session is bipartisan. I don't have the exact statistic, but it is in the high 90s in terms of the percentage of bills that we pass off the House floor that has bipartisan support. This year, oh gosh, it's going to stump me. We've had a lot of bipartisan support on some really, really good bills. And I'm trying to think of what one would be the most surprising. Let me think. I'm going to like try and look down and see. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to just go for it. Middle housing. So, House Bill 1110 that dealt with middle housing. Lots of myths in communities and lots of facts going around about it. I will say, looking at the bipartisan support for middle housing tells you that it's well considered, well thought out, and well supported amongst my colleagues on both sides of the chamber. So I would say that was probably the most surprising, but also the most necessary as we have a session really focusing on housing. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you for that response. Just as a reminder to everybody who's tuning in tonight, you are watching a live virtual town hall with your state representative, April Berg. You can ask a question in the comment section, so go ahead and ask your questions. We're moving on to the next one, and that is, what is the legislature doing this session to address the housing crisis? Kind of a perfect segue from 1110.
Yeah, no, and that's a great segue. And so thank you for whoever asked that question because we are very much focused on housing as a foundation. If you've seen me talk before, you've seen me talk about housing first being really my North Star. Until we get folks housed, it's very difficult to concentrate on anything else going on in life, anything from healthcare to education to workforce. If you don't have a place to live, it's very, very hard to succeed in other areas. So, housing legislation. Talked about middle housing, great bill. We're also doing things around accessory dwelling units. And because that basically allows you to turn part of your property into a second room or a second living space for someone within your family or outside of your family. Full disclosure, I'm a very big fan of ADUs because I think it's a great way for generations to cohabitate. And frankly, with COVID and some of the lessons that we learned, we found that it's a good thing to have multiple generations in one household. The other thing that has been really awesome and very much bipartisan is around permitting and any process delays that we have around building new housing. And so a group of amazing legislators got together in the interim, bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats, and sat down and said, what do we need to do from a policy standpoint to allow for more housing quicker, faster? And what they came up with was a suite of bills that dealt with everything from design review to basic permitting to SEPA review. And again, bipartisan, and everybody kind of took a piece, and we're slowly getting those across the finish line. So I tell you, as a homeowner, and I think about the permitting process around building out an ADU or adding on to your existing home, and you think, oh, this is frustrating and takes a long time, and couldn't it be better? Well, we heard that loud and clear from you as homeowners and from builders and from community members who need housing. And so we took it to heart, created a suite of bills. And so by the end of session, you will have seen a great package get over the finish line addressing permitting, SEPA reviews, environmental concerns, as well as just pure stock, right? So that's 1110, where we're talking about creating more middle housing. And I don't want to forget, and I don't want to ever talk about housing without talking about affordable housing. And we do have measures that are coming through both the House and the Senate that focus on affordable housing. We know that housing is incredibly expensive right now, and a lot of our neighbors, a lot of our community members can't afford market rate housing for a variety of reasons. And let me tell you, one of the biggest ones I hear in my office is workforce. We've got a lot of entry level firefighters or nurses or teachers who are our workforce, the backbone of our communities, who need housing that isn't exactly market rate. And that's okay. And so we are really looking at all three elements of housing. We have our market rate, we have our workforce housing, and then, of course, we have low income housing for neighbors who truly cannot afford housing at any of the other two rates at this point. So great question. We're doing a lot. I'll be very excited at the end of the session to tell you what made it over the finish line and how it'll affect you in your community.
Great. Thank you, Rep Berg. So our next question was also pre-submitted. Is there a time frame on Congress allowing Washington State to stop doing the spring forward fallback stuff? I'm sure after this weekend, we probably would all like to know the answer to that question.
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. And I always laugh. I know daylight savings is coming when I start seeing the op-eds, letters to the editor, and occasional emails to my office saying, "What are you doing? How do we do this?" So let me be upfront. Our state has passed a bill that says if Congress can eliminate it, then we're on board. We're right there. We can trigger it. We can be right there with Congress. I haven't talking to our congressional delegation and going back to DC to lobby a little bit. I have not heard any real excitement over eliminating daylight savings. It's a conversation point. It's an issue. I tell you, I wish we could do something about it at the state level, but unfortunately, it is going to take Congress, and we'll keep pushing. But thank you for that question, and I hope everybody was here on time today and remembered to spring forward this last Sunday.
Yes, that was certainly rough this past
It
Sunday
was.
to realize we lost that hour. Yeah.
Yeah, hour you'll never get back. I'm so sorry.
All right. So we're moving on to question 9. How has constituent voice translated into your proposed legislation this session?
Oh my word. Thank you for that. Constituent voice is everything. I tell you right now, I'm coming to you from my office in Olympia. So this is when you come visit, this is what you're going to see. If you look in the very back, you're going to see a lot of notes, a lot of thank you cards, and a lot of communication. I treasure those. I treasure constituent voice. So the way it impacts legislation is it gives us ideas. It lets me know where I need to advocate. And frankly, it lets me know where some of our policies are broken or outdated. And so you can see with some of the bills that I've passed in previous sessions where that constituent voice was important and at one point actually helped write a bill. So I tell you, I had a bill that dealt with our 9th grade students not receiving college in the high school. It was a constituent voice from all the way across my personal kitchen table, and it affected my kiddos. I talked to some parents, it affected their kiddos. I talked to some of our amazing high school counselors. They said, hey, this is a big problem for students. And as a result, I wrote a bill. And so that constituent voice, it comes from more than just across my kitchen table. It comes from all over our district. And that's what inspires me. I tell you, our current county auditor had a great idea about protecting his employees. And that translated into a bill that then got combined with another bill around protecting election workers. And I'm glad to say that passed last year. So I tell you, keep writing, keep calling, keep coming out to town halls and giving me good ideas. And as many as I can, I will translate those into bills. The other thing you can do if you want to know how the process works is tune in to one of my Berg Bill Basics. It's a series that I'm doing talking about the bill writing and passing process. And it's very accessible. It's going to be in multiple parts. And I believe we have part 1 and part 2 is about to be launched. It'll be a series of 7 videos that you won't want to miss. So you'll see exactly how constituent voice influences policy making. So thank you for that question.
Great. And thank you for that plug of that awesome product that we're going to put out.
Yes,
Excited for it. So our next question is, this past summer, Roe v. Wade was overturned. How will this impact state law in Washington? Is reproductive health care under attack in our state?
So I will tell you that reproductive health care is under attack. And I am proud to serve in a state where we, at the constitutional level, even before Roe v. Wade, we were protecting a woman's right to choose, a woman's right to health care, to basic health care. But at the national level, that is not something that we currently enjoy because of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And we are seeing every day a slow chipping away at our rights. And I say our rights because right now there's a case in, I believe it's Amarillo, Texas, that may eliminate yet another important healthcare tool that women in our state utilize. So all of this is full circle. All of this affects us. But for our state, I am confident that we will continue to not only protect a woman's right to choose into healthcare, basic healthcare, but we will continue to strengthen it. And there's a couple of things that we're doing, and I'm very proud that we did this session. One is getting a Health Data Privacy Act passed from the House floor. So just to boil it down, this means those apps that those of us who use apps to track different times of their month, fertility, non-fertility, protecting the data that's withheld in those apps so that no one can trace or track or penalize you based on what you're putting into those apps. I know that we had a constitutional amendment floated around protecting it even stronger than what was done at the ballot box in the 70s. That is still out there. And then the other thing that we're doing is making it so that providers are safe in terms of who they're treating, and if they treat someone from a different state, making sure that they're not penalized, and really making our state a sanctuary for women seeking healthcare. And I say that intentionally. We are talking about basic healthcare. And so it is protected, but it is absolutely under attack. And I'm proud to be part of a body that will continually work to protect women's basic health care. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Rep Berg. So our next question is, can you talk about some of the gun violence bills in the legislature?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And we've had a lot of bills that are addressing gun violence in community. And what we're trying to do is take a common sense approach to protecting community and also maintaining our Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. And there is absolutely a way to do it. And so the first thing that I mentioned earlier was the fact that we passed the assault rifle ban off of the House floor. Very important, very necessary. Those are weapons of war. And at no point in our community should we be at war with one another. The second thing that we looked at, and I believe passed off the House floor, was background checks or permit to purchase. And so that basically it's strengthening some of the background check language that we have, but also creating an educational framework around when you purchase a gun and making sure that you have the education you need on that firearm before you purchase it. It really is a safety issue for both the community, but also for the gun owner and the folks around the gun owner, making sure they understand the weapon that they have. So yeah, we are doing a lot around gun safety. I know the Senate is tossing over a couple of bills around gun safety. And we've got to do better. We've got to keep our kiddos safe. I'll tell you, I got some of the most heartfelt thank yous with tears from our teaching community, our students who were just overwhelmed, especially when we passed the assault rifle ban. Those weapons of war too often are used in educational spaces nationwide. And so for some of my colleagues, and I say this because it really didn't hit me till we passed that legislation. They were a generation that grew up with lockdowns. They are the lockdown generation. They are serving with me as colleagues in our people's house. And they grew up in an educational system that was mandatory. You had to know how to run, fight, hide. And that's not okay. And so them being here in this moment and being able to pass that historic legislation made them feel like the next generation will be safer. And it made me as a mom feel like I really got it done for my kids. So to the teachers and the students and the community members that reached out and said thank you, came by and said thank you, wrote beautiful emails and even some text messages. We see you, we hear you, we're going to keep doing more, and we got to do better. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that response, Representative Berg. I just wanted to remind everybody who's tuning in tonight that this is a live virtual town hall with State Representative April Berg, and you can submit your question via the comment section. This next question is a bit long, so bear with me. In regards to higher education and CTCs, before the Great Recession, the legislature allocated funding for general salary increases and part time pay equity, and they funded the COLA 100%. The recession changed that, student tuition went sky high, wages stagnated, and pay inequality remained. What will it take for you to support a return to the legislatures taking seriously the state's responsibility to provide the funding needed to fully meet the needs of students and the workforce?
Yeah, that is a long question, but man, is it a good question. And so you are spot on that we've got an education issue and we've got a workforce issue, and we see it every day in community. So the first thing I'm going to say is that we are doing tons to make sure that we address both at the same time. I will start with dual credit. I am so happy that we have a state that when our high school students hit 11th grade, they have the opportunity to start Running Start and receive dual credit in one of our amazing colleges. And so I tell parents, I tell students, take advantage. Why does that matter with this question? Because that's a workforce thing. The quicker you can get the education, the certification, whether it's college, whether it's a trade, the quicker you can get there, the quicker you can start earning and participating in the workforce. So we have bills right now talking about really eliminating the fees, the cost of dual credit in our state, both college and the high school, as well as Running Start. The other thing, as far as workforce, I mentioned earlier, Core Plus. It is an amazing program that our state has that is directly with the trades directly with the industries in particular areas, aerospace, construction, pretty soon maritime. And again, that's a direct entry program. The other thing I have to talk about, cannot talk about, or can't not talk about in this moment is our regional apprenticeship program. I am so proud of Snohomish County that we really wrote the book, set the foundation on regional apprenticeships. So this is in direct relation with our trades. And so high schoolers who might not want to do Running Start or might not want to do a Core Plus program can actually, in our area, in Snohomish County, utilize what's called a regional apprenticeship program to get hands-on experience and certification in a trade. So that is how we are tackling both the education piece as well as the workforce piece. Now, I think another piece of this, and I don't want to skip over it, is that you asked about the recession and some of the things that this recession has done to tuition prices and wage stagnation and pay inequity. And you are correct that tuition is rising. We do have inflation, and it really, what I call it is an unequal recovery. So what we saw during COVID were historic investments from our federal government to families, to businesses, to educational institutes. To help us get through, to help us stay open, to help us keep moving forward. Now we're at a point where we're coming out of it, and I sometimes call it a little bit of a sugar high, and that's led to inflation, and in some pockets, real recession. And so what we're trying to do is focus on how can we still meet people's needs while really pulling back, unfortunately, on some of the resources we have available to us. So working with our colleges to strengthen our college bound program, which helps some of our neediest students make it across the finish line in college. There was a bill, and I believe we passed it off the House floor, that actually allowed for you to have an additional year in college bound, which was a nod to the fact that degrees are no longer 4 years, no longer 5 years, but sometimes potentially 6 years to complete a college degree if that's what you choose to do. So we're looking at a package of bills that address workforce, tuition costs, as well as, and the last part of that was pay inequity. And the pay inequity piece are things that we are slowly chipping away. As a fiscal chair for finance, I'm always looking at the tax inequities and how we as a state really don't have tax fairness because we rely on sales tax, which taxes everybody equally, whether you make $1 billion or you make $10,000, you're being taxed effectively the same amount, because we're mostly being taxed when we buy goods and services. So that is something that we've had a couple of bills, including wealth tax, that have addressed those inequities and the upside down tax code, and we're continuing to look at those. So thank you for that question. I know it was a long question, long answer, but the biggest takeaway is we are continuing to move forward.
Great. Thank you, Rep Berg. Our next question is, utilities, groceries, rent, and basic needs are getting too expensive. What are you working on to provide relief?
Yes. So what we are working on to provide relief, and I tell you, I'm going to start with rent. There were some amazing bills that talked about rent stabilization, and I thought they were very thoughtful. They were very well articulated bills that could really help folks who are struggling with higher rent prices. Unfortunately, they did not make it off the House floor, but I will say they started a conversation that will continue. And what the bill, I think there was two bills that addressed the problem in a similar way, and that was capping how much you could actually be charged when you renew a lease or a rental agreement. And it was a substantial cap. It was I think it was upwards of 7%. Now all bets were off when the owner of that particular rental put it out on the market again for an initial tenant. But with an existing tenant, when you renewed, you would have a known cap. And that was important because what I've heard from so many constituents is that rent is going up in astronomical ways. And what can the state do? So that was a plan. And again, not rent control, but it was rent stabilization. And like I said, it did not make it off the House floor. The other issue that we're looking at is utilities. And I know we do have funds that we are looking at putting more money into funds around utility assistance, and as well as rental assistance. And then as far as groceries, I'll tell you, the biggest issue, it's a supply chain issue, it's a workforce issue, and it's a public safety issue that are driving the cost of groceries. So to tackle that, we've kind of got to take a trifecta approach, making sure our grocery stores are protected. They're not being robbed. They're not being, terrorized by these literally crime syndicates. We're not talking about basic shoplifting. We are talking about wholesale crime. So making sure that we've got the laws in the books to protect our grocery stores so that they can keep the prices down. Working on our supply chain. I tell you, a bill that you might think, gosh, how is that connected to groceries? But we passed a bill off the House floor that talked about truckers being able to use the bathrooms at ports. Now, just imagine our supply chain and how it was affected during COVID, and the amazing men and women that drive our trucks, that carry our goods, and they get to a port, and some of them were not being able to use the restroom. So that's a supply chain issue. That's a trucker who might not want to take that route. That might be an area that's hard to service now, all because of a basic need that they couldn't do. So we're looking at all the elements that are driving up prices and trying to tackle those where we can with legislative policy or where we can with legislative fiscal support. So thank you for that question, and just know that that we really are recovering, but it is not an equal recovery. So I feel your pain, and just thank you for coming out tonight.
Great. Thank you, Rep Berg. This is just another reminder that you're tuning in to a live virtual town hall with State Representative April Berg from the 44th Legislative District. And if you have a question, you can feel free to pop that in the comment section. This question comes from that comment section. I have seen you as a sponsor on many education bills. What's your plan on special education funding to ensure disabled children can learn as well as their non-disabled peers?
So special ed is basic ed. And I want to say that loud and clear. And as a legislator, as a parent, as a former school board director, I know that and I feel that. And it breaks my heart every day that we as a state are not doing enough for our disabled students. That said, we do have budget constraints. And I wish, and frankly, I still hope, if you've ever heard me at speeches and at talks and at coffee chats, I'm a unicorns and rainbows kind of girl. I like to think that we can absolutely do the impossible, especially when it's necessary. So that said, at this point in our budget process, we don't have the funds to commit to a lot of services that we know are important and needed in community, including special ed. But what we will do this session is make historic investments that are above and beyond anything we've ever done for our special ed students. I will tell you frankly about special ed that we need federal support. Our state is doing a lot in terms of funding our special ed students when you look at our peer states, and the federal government is frankly not doing their fair share. They support special ed students at right around 11% of the funding, and that's frankly not enough. And the burden then falls to local communities who have to pass levies to do additional support, and the state is trying the best we can to get funds out to those students and for those needs. That said, we had our Office of Superintendent of Public Education or Public Instruction came out with a plan. And as a legislator, I would love to fully fund that plan. And as we move through the budget process, we will be looking at how much can we give. So what we've done with special ed funding in terms of a House bill is really a floor, saying this is the minimum commitment. And if I have my numbers right, this minimum commitment is going to be about $120 million more than we've ever funded. I believe, again, back to my unicorns and rainbows, that we can do better. And once we get the economic revenue forecast, which will be coming out on March 20th, I am hoping that we see a forecast that says we have more resources to give towards things like special ed. Now, I'm going to do a little inside baseball here. Our state is a balanced budget state. We do not spend what we do not have. We cannot spend what we do not have. So as a result, when we make a commitment, we have to be able to fund that commitment. And we also have a policy in our state to do a 4-year lookout. So when we make that commitment for 2 years of a budget, we also have to project into the next 2 years. And that is really the secret sauce to keeping our state's budget balanced. So I'm telling you all this because I want you to know how much we are trying to get there, because special education is basic education. Thank you for that question. And this will not be the last you hear from me on special education funding. And again, I'm unicorns and rainbows. I am hoping that we can get there.
Great. Thank you so much, Rep Berg. This question comes from a constituent in Mill Creek. They ask, do you have an update on HB 1333 and HB 1556? That last one being your property tax rebate bill.
Oh, thank you for that. Because I was going to say, can somebody phone a friend? Because as much as I want to remember the ones. So Megan, can you remind me of the bill numbers again? You said, what was the one? 1556. Yep. I'm looking on my board. If you come visit,
1556. Yes.
I've got a big whiteboard in my office with my bill numbers. So 1556, I will tell you, and this I'm going to blame the chair on this one. So the chair of finance has not moved her own bill. And the reason for that, it's a good bill. It is something that I want to do for community, but I got to make sure we have the money to do it. So again, back to that revenue forecast and back to only spending what we have, I got to make sure we have the funds to do it. So 1556 is, of course, a top priority, but it is not going anywhere until we know we have the funds to do it. And then Megan, what's the other bill you mentioned, 1333?
Yes, 1333 is sponsored by Representative Ramos. It's establishing the domestic violent extremism.
Thank you for that. Yes, I should know that. I'm the second person on that bill. So that bill was a bill that really did come from both the 5th district, which encompasses areas like Black Diamond and Issaquah, as well as our district, the 44th, which of course encompasses areas like downtown Snohomish. And for those of you who were here during the summer after George Floyd's murder, we had a lot of really impactful community conversations, community protests, community just community grieving over the state of relations nationwide. That said, we also had folks who wanted to take that moment and use it for violence and intimidation. And as a result, we had a lot of acts and continue to have acts of domestic violent extremism. And 1333 was written in response to that. And it is actually written in response to an AG study that was done with the Attorney General's office, as well as the Anti-Defamation League, to say, what can we do? What can we do to keep communities safer? Everyone in the community safer. And so as a result, 1333 would give resources, studies, et cetera, around domestic violence extremism. That is a bill that did not come off the House floor before cutoff. So unfortunately, this session, we will not be seeing 1333 make it to the governor's desk. But I will say that the conversation is continuing around domestic violent extremism and around keeping communities safe, and keeping them whole. And just to, I bring a lot of things back to the economy, and to Main Street and to your kitchen table. And after we had a very horrific situation in May of 2020, I believe it was, I think it was, no, actually 2021, in downtown Snohomish, that impacted businesses. People didn't feel safe going into some businesses after you had folks coming up and down Main Street with long guns, intimidating words, and frankly, intimidating actions. So when we talk about keeping communities safe, that also means keeping them economically whole. Because when people don't feel safe, they don't shop. They don't go out to dinner with their families. They don't take a lazy Saturday by the river. So this safety, from domestic violent extremism really impacts us in ways that sometimes we don't understand until you wonder why your favorite business isn't thriving the way it should be. So I just want to just put that in context. Those are both bills, again, near and dear to my heart. There could be a path forward for 1556, and unfortunately for 1333, that one has been put to bed, at least for this year. So thank you for that question, and thank you for paying attention to my bill numbers.
Great. Thank you so much, Rep Berg. So our next question is, what is the best way to connect with you and make sure we can share our opinions this legislative session?
Great question. A great way is doing just what you're doing now, connecting with me on a town hall, either virtually or in person. Of course, emailing. And then, if you want to, I'll tell you the secret sauce too. If you email me and you're a constituent in the 44th, please put that in the heading of the email. You can, of course, go to TVW, watch all of our committee hearings, all of our floor time. And then we do have a legislative website where you can look up bills like 1333 and 1556 or 1110 and all those other crazy numbers to see what they're doing. And it's going to show you both in words as well as visually where that bill is in the process. But I would say, as far as directly connecting with me, email is always going to be your best bet. My amazing assistant, Catherine, which many of you know in the district, she's there to help kind of direct traffic in and out of the office, both virtually as well as in person. And I do love connecting with each and every one of you because I'm here to serve you.
Great, thank you. And what is likely to be our last question of the evening. At this point in session, what is the best way to advocate for House bills that are being heard in the Senate?
That's a great question. So we just completed about 2 weeks or a week and a half of floor action. And we just ground it out in the floor, both in the House and the Senate, so that we could literally flip-flop the bills, right? So we had what we called the House of Origin cutoff. That was last Wednesday. And anything that didn't make it past the House floor wasn't going to the Senate. Anything that didn't make it past the Senate floor wasn't coming to the House. So now, to your question, how do you advocate for these great House bills that are in the Senate for consideration? I would say the best way to do it is go to our legislative website, and I'm hoping my team can put that in in a virtual chat that I think we have, so that you know where to go, and you can put in the bill number that you care about. You can also find some great things, like if you want to find my name, look at the details. It'll tell you the bills that I've co-sponsored. It'll tell you the bills that I've primary sponsored. You click on the bill, it shows you where it is in the process. The best way to advocate for those bills right now is to send in written testimony or sign up to testify virtually or in person. I like written testimony because you can get all of your words out. Folks can have it in their email box, and they'll know that, yeah, somebody cares about this bill. Somebody cares about the bill that I have going through the Senate right now, protecting animals as well as consumers. I call it my puppy bill. I also have a bill on water safety, a bill on municipal annexations. I would love for everyone to send in virtual testimony, or you can also just click a box to say, yep, I'm in favor of it, or nope, I'm not. So the website is powerful and really the best way to advocate for bills that have come from the House into the Senate. And to be honest, vice versa. So if you've got a Senate bill out there that you're like, Rep Berg, you really need to take a good look at this bill, go ahead and do the same thing for those Senate bills. I know the amazing Senator Levick has some bills that I can't wait to see on this side of the rotunda. And letting me know that you like it just as much as he does always goes a long way.
Great. Thank you so much, Rep Berg. And actually, yes, we'll have your contact information that will go up at the end of this.
Thank you so much.
So that was our last question of the evening. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question. I'm going to turn it back over to Rep Berg for a few closing remarks. Rep Berg?
Thank you so much, Megan. And thank you to the team that is behind the scenes tonight, working a late night, making sure that I can talk to you, my constituents. I cannot thank you enough for coming out virtually tonight to ask me these great questions. And I cannot thank you enough because I'm honored to be your state representative. We do have more of session to come. So you'll notice a lot of my answers tonight were maybe maybes and we'll see, and we're going to get back to you. And it's not because I'm dodging the question. It's just because we're in the middle of the process. And it's a good process. It's a democratic process. It's a process that all of you contribute to each and every day by getting up and going to work, going to school, taking care of a loved one, and frankly, just being in the 44th. So I can't thank you enough for being here tonight. I hope I see some of you on Saturday at Woodside Elementary at 10 a.m. And of course, you're going to get my contact information. But I will say, for information, the best thing you can do is sign up for my newsletter. And of course, follow me on Facebook. And that's facebook.com/Rep April Berg. With that, good night to everyone. I would say drive safe, but yeah, I think you're already probably where you're going to be. So just have a great rest of your night.
Great. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have this evening. Thank you so much for attending and for submitting questions. If we did not get to your question, you can directly contact Rep Berg's office with your comments. Her contact information will be on the screen shortly. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great evening.
Thanks.